Welcome to Humans of Teaching, a podcast that explores the unique and amazing ways that humans of all walks of life teach others. Let's learn something new. Welcome in, friends, to a new episode of Humans of Teaching. So thankful that you're sitting down with us today because we are opening the door here on Humans of Teaching to a specific individual that is going to enlighten us on how important it is and how effective it is to reach out to the people around you to best teach your content. The person I'm referring to today is Emily Bernstein of the Holocaust Center of Pittsburgh. I teach a class called History of the Holocaust. And before reaching out to the Holocaust Center of Pittsburgh and Emily Bernstein, who is the Education Outreach Associate, my abilities were, I would say, pretty standard. I wasn't taking it to the next level as I wanted to. And once I found the support system that they provided me, all of the resources, professional development, Holocaust speakers coming into my actual school, was I able to take my teaching and my students' learning to the next level. The Holocaust Center of Pittsburgh is an amazing institution that is there to help educators teach about the Holocaust in the most effective way possible. And they've done it for me, and I know they can do it for you. No matter how much or how little you currently teach about the Holocaust or plan on teaching about it in the future, the Holocaust Center of Pittsburgh has something for you. So, ladies and gentlemen, before we get into the interview, I'd like to take a second and remind you that Humans of Teaching is entirely free. We don't have any advertisements or sponsorships that you need to sit through, so all we ask is that you would do us a solid and leave a review of what you love about the podcast. We'd love to hear it. The next way we would appreciate your support is to share this podcast with some of your friends, family members, or literally anyone you think would find value from this. Do you have a fellow teacher, educator, or someone you know that is interested in teaching about the Holocaust or is doing it for the first time? Or a current Holocaust educator looking to bring their curriculum and lessons to life in a different way for their students? Teaching about the Holocaust is an incredibly important responsibility as educators, and it's something that we have to tread on carefully. It's a sensitive subject and oftentimes can be pretty intimidating for a new teacher and even an experienced one. But the Holocaust Center and Emily Bernstein offer so many resources for us to use to make teaching about the Holocaust easy. So I encourage all of you to check out the show notes of today's episode for all of the resources that Emily shares in our interview today, as well as ways to reach out to her and the Holocaust Center of Pittsburgh for more information. So without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, sit back, relax, and enjoy today's interview with Miss Emily Bernstein. All right, friends, welcome into a new episode of Humans of Teaching. I'm ecstatic to have you here because I have a good friend of mine, Emily Bernstein, is sitting down with us today. And she has a very unique role in education. So first off, Emily, how are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. It's great to see you and great to have you here. So, Emily, I was just about to get into that you have a really cool role within education because you provide services to hundreds, if not possibly thousands of schools across the nation in regards to a specific area, and that is Holocaust education. And personally, as a history of the Holocaust teacher, I have utilized you and the Holocaust Center of Pittsburgh tons and tons of times over the 5 years that I've been teaching this. So your work has not gone unnoticed, and I really appreciate all that you've done, and I want to spread the word to all of the teachers listening of the things that you can provide. So, Emily, I want to take some time and just have you take the floor and share your personal background because every position is different based on the person who is leading that position. You are the Education Outreach Associate for the Holocaust Center of Pittsburgh. And what you bring to the table is something different than another person would bring to the table. So can you take a few minutes and share your background and what led you personally into the field of teaching and specifically this role?
Wow, that's such a tall order, but it's interesting. Life life is so circuitous, I guess you'd say. Um, I'm from New Jersey. I'm from South Jersey near Vineland, and I grew up in a community that had a lot of Holocaust survivors. We actually have the highest population of Holocaust survivors per capita in the state of New Jersey. And that's because there were programs, while it's a very old Jewish community, because it was set up by Baron de Hirsch as an Allianz community around 300 years ago. Um, there's also a large population of survivors because there were programs that helped survivors come to the United States and become chicken and egg farmers after the war and restart their lives in South Jersey. So I grew up around many survivors, though my family came to the United States in the 1880s during the mass migration. So um, I always had that as part of my life, and going to synagogue and talking to survivors. Um, and I also grew up in a family with many educators. My grandmother was an educator, a reading and writing educator, remedial reading, and she served on our school board for about 27 years. And she always instilled in me this love of learning, and my parents as well. You know, they're just very much self-educated people who we have lots of books, and um, my mom specifically loves to teach herself how to do lots of different things. So I grew up in that type of environment. And growing up, I always emulated my teachers, and they were my role models. So as I got older, I actually had this very twisty turny educational journey myself. And I started out with, in college, I went to school I double majored in English literature and pre-dental studies. I thought I was going to be a dentist. And that, it's weird. I guess I was looking for something that would be a professional job that I would do well. It's a great
Sure.
field for women. Um, and, there's some work-life balance. But as I got into that, I realized that's not what I wanted. And I just
Hmm.
focused purely on English literature, and I minored in Jewish history. I spent some time working in the publishing field after I graduated. I worked for a small children's book publisher in Philadelphia as an intern, and then I also was substitute teaching on the side. And through substitute teaching, I felt so much meaning. I felt like I was really giving back to my community, and it was so rewarding. So I decided at that time that I wanted to really be a writer, and that I would eventually teach writing. So I applied for a master's degree in writing from Emerson. I got in, but then I deferred. I deferred that entrance because I also have this strong interest in Jewish studies. And I thought, well, I'll give myself some time to decide if I want to move to Boston. So I moved to New York. And in New York, I went to a yeshiva called Drisha, which is a women's, what they call it, like a kollel program, or a study during the day program. And it's an academic yeshiva for women. And I learned basic language learning like Aramaic and Rabbinic Hebrew, and studied basically Jewish law and history. And through that experience, I realized what I really wanted was a research degree, and I can I can still write without an MFA. So I went to Rutgers after that, and all throughout this whole time, I was still substitute teaching. It was something that I really enjoyed. Um, then I went to Rutgers, and I got my master's in Jewish studies. And this was really a game changer for me. I, I studied Judaism from a religious side, and now I studied it from a secular academic perspective. And I focused on Jewish memory studies and American Jewish life. Those are my concentrations. So memory studies, which is an interdisciplinary field, that focuses not so much on what we remember, but how we remember it, really changed my life. It changed my understanding of human beings um, and identity narrative. And I really, I really blossomed in that academic realm. So then, after I graduated, what do I do with this degree? In fact, a lot of people ask you, what do you do with a degree in Jewish studies other than go to a PhD program? And at the time, I was completely
Right.
burned out. So I decided I'm going to hold off on a PhD. and I wanted to do something in the world with this knowledge. So I had to move back home, and I went back into teaching in the meantime while I was sort of incubating, what do I do with this? And during that time, um, I had developed a rapport with my local school district, and they took me on as a long-term substitute school librarian in an elementary school that my grandmother had her first teaching job in. So there was a really wonderful connection there for
That's great.
my family history. And I have to tell you, being a school librarian or a school media specialist, it's the best gig in the world. I have to tell you. Um, I loved it. I loved that. And it's a shame that a lot of people within the realm of education don't necessarily see the value of school media specialists. I think the field is really
Sure.
changing. But for many, it's just vague. What does the school librarian do? But they do so much. And I revived a school library that had been dormant for 4 years. I took it upon myself to read and just I learned how to repair books. I taught myself how to do a lot of the things that school librarians do, though I don't have a degree in it. And I just loved helping students with literacy issues learn how to read and learn how to enjoy something, because oftentimes they say, I don't want to read. And really, it's they don't know what they like to read. And once they find something they love to read, their skills improve dramatically. Um, so that was so meaningful. Unfortunately, the school district decided to hire someone else who had the master's in information science, but was on retirement's doorstep. So um, at that point, I was at a crossroads. And I thought, now it's time for me to use this degree in Jewish studies somehow. Maybe I can mesh them both together, library science and Jewish studies, who knows? So I was given the opportunity to move to Pittsburgh to live with a cousin of mine who thought I might really like it there. And in the first 10 days of living in Pittsburgh, I found a job with the Jewish Federation. And though I wasn't working at the Holocaust Center, that job eventually led me to meeting Dr. Lauren Bairnsfather, who is the director of the Holocaust Center of Pittsburgh. And when I met her, it was like everything culminated into one, all this knowledge that I have acquired over time to fit a role that was really meant for me. And I'm so grateful that I've been able to find this niche of Holocaust education that combines my personal experience and my academic experience and my creativity and my love of education all into one. So that is the circuitous, long-winded way that I
S-
got here.
Starting and finishing with the same word you
Yes.
begin with. How well done. Emily, that was fantastic. So it's pretty incredible that you found your true home. And it's important, I think, for all of our listeners to understand that, it took a lot of steps for you to eventually find a place where you could really utilize effectively all of the amazing things that you learned and all the amazing things that you could offer others, right? So you went from different degrees to different interests and professions to student teaching to a librarian and a media specialist to different cities across the nation, all to end up at one location where you can truly show off and utilize all the amazing things that you know and that you can offer. So the road oftentimes isn't easy and the road oftentimes isn't short, but eventually you can really find yourself in a place that you can truly call home. And I love that.
Yeah, and I also have to give my mom a plug because she is always into Holocaust education. If my
Sure.
mom didn't bring it to our school when I was growing up, because I grew up in a rural area where there are many elderly Jews, but not many young Jews, and
Right.
if she didn't bring it to our school through the Parent Teachers Association, we might not have gotten it at all. And she has served on the South Jersey Holocaust Commission, um, and really kind of instilled um, that option for me. Um, though at first I didn't want to do that because it was something I had known. I was as a young, 20 something, I was looking for something different than what I knew, and it kind of that's another way that it became circuitous, which was, my mom encouraged me to be involved in this realm as well.
Sure. And it's pretty interesting because I think a lot of our listeners can really, get down with that because oftentimes teachers become teachers because they're family. Were teachers in the past, like mom, dad, grandma,
Hmm.
grandpa, whoever. Oftentimes, were teachers in the past, and were often, instilled these values and these beliefs and these, career interests from the people that come before us. And Holocaust education was instilled on you by your family. But personally, that may be the case for a lot of our listeners when it comes to the interests of teaching that they moved into, the content areas, or the field of teaching themselves. But personally, for me, I moved into teaching because one, it was something that I felt I would be, pretty good at, and I felt I had a lot to offer with. But when it comes to Holocaust education, personally, I was put into the situation with very little knowledge outside of general understanding of the Holocaust and World War II history. But it was through teaching the course and trying to make the course better and better and better and better every single year that I came to be really knowledgeable on it and reaching out to you specifically in the Holocaust Center of Pittsburgh to make this happen with the class. So you don't always, and I'm sure you can attest to this, have to have an initial interest or background in it. It can just be something that falls into your lap and you just want to do it the best way you can. And part of that is reaching out for the resources to help you do that the best way you can.
And there are so many resources, Peter.
Yeah. So that's a great transition into the actual Holocaust Center. So we move through your story. You find yourself at the doorstep of the Holocaust Center of Pittsburgh, which you've been working at for years now. So detail to the listeners, how does the Holocaust Center of Pittsburgh provide Holocaust education in-house specifically, but also how can you support schools and educators listening on how they can teach about the Holocaust in their classes?
Great question. The Holocaust Center does so many different things. We actually have a menu of offerings. We call it a menu because we love to cater the experience that the kids have at the Holocaust Center, which is at 826 Hazelwood Avenue in Greenfield. Um, we like to cater that to the experience of the students because we have no idea where students are when they walk in the door. We'd like to be in touch with our teachers ahead of time to see what students are learning. And then if we can cater their experience to what they're actually learning in class, even better. Um, because at the crux of Holocaust education is helping young people understand why something that feels so far away in history is really part of us now. It's a human story, not just a Jewish story. And what working in this field has taught me is that not much has changed about human behavior across the centuries. And there are so many lessons to be learned from the Holocaust. And making it more accessible to students in the form of stories, real stories, is what the Holocaust Center aims to do. So when they come to the Holocaust Center, usually what happens is we are in contact with a teacher, or a teacher finds out about us. And we talk a little bit with that teacher and pick a time for them to come to the center. And I kind of pick that teacher's brain, what are you studying right now? And then we cater a tour to the group that's coming. I think the largest tour that we've ever had is around 65 students. We're a small space, but we do have permanent and temporary exhibitions. Um, and we've had whole schools come just on different days during the week. Typically, we have schools on Tuesdays and Thursdays throughout the year. And our front gallery is always a changing gallery, and everything in the back is our permanent objects, many of which come from France due to a generous permanent loan donation from the Friedman family. Um, and usually, a field trip begins with students coming in and they hear a generation speaker. A generation speaker is someone who is either the second generation or third generation um, relative of a Holocaust survivor, usually one of their children or grandchildren. The reason for this being is we now live in a time when, in the next 5 to 7 years, our Holocaust survivors won't be with us anymore. So we're building a robust generation speakers series to help tell their story. And often, children of survivors will accompany um, the survivor to help them tell their story. And we do have some of these generation speakers talks available on our website for anyone who's interested in taking a look to see if you'd like to bring a generation speaker to your school. We've actually done a lot of virtual generation speakers events. This past year in the South Hills, we actually had an event with Debbie Suber and her parents over Skype or Zoom at the Mount Lebanon Library. So we live in an amazing world of technology. Um, so we try to make that available as well. But when students come in, they get to actually meet that person. And it does make a difference because when they first walk in, we're not saying this is the Holocaust, this is anti-Semitism. We're not bombarding them with information. They're getting to know a person, a personal story. And hopefully just learning that story and witnessing that story becomes a part of them and their own story. That's the goal, that there should be a personal connection to understand the relevance of why we're discussing this topic. So after they hear their generation speaker, they get a time where they can ask questions. And that is what frames their initial perspective of what they're going to see at the Holocaust Center. And we transition to a tour of material objects in which we discuss the themes of what is the Holocaust, who are the groups that were targeted, um, answering questions about what life was like in a concentration camp or in hiding or in the partisans. Sometimes we watch a film and we discuss what it's like to be a child of survivors. What is the post-memory effect of the Holocaust in families today, and the children that, while they weren't experiencing the Holocaust, experience it through their parents. And then we move into our front gallery where we have traveling exhibits of all different kinds. And right now we have an exhibit that is Pittsburgh focused. It's called For You Were Strangers, and it's an original exhibit that we just put out a few weeks ago, and it's going to be running until May. And now, due to the current situation, it's going to be available digitally. So that's something I'll be able to share with your listeners. And it's fascinating to see Jewish immigration from 1880 to 1990 to the Pittsburgh area, and what they were fleeing in Europe, what they were hoping to find in Pittsburgh, and all the organizations that help them to acclimate and thrive in their new life, and many of which are still in existence today. So that has been a very rewarding experience to show students a localized exhibit, and to help them connect even further to the story of history, and how it really wasn't that long ago, and they can connect to it more. So that's, in a nutshell, the sort of things we do at the center. And with advance notice, we can even bring archival objects up from our storage to tell other stories with those objects based on what students are learning.
Perfect. Perfect. So I personally can attest to all of the amazing things that we at PA Distance have been able to be a part of at the Holocaust Center, both physically and virtually. PA Distance is a cyber school, and you all have offered so many opportunities to us to actually inviting Holocaust survivors to PA Distance to be able to host a virtual seminar for all of our students to be a part of, to have us come into the Holocaust Center virtually for some of the survivors and discussions that you'll have there, to see all of the different exhibits as well as the online resources that you all provide. So we couldn't be more thankful for that. And I think this is a great transition into actually teaching about the Holocaust, because we want to show that Holocaust education can be shared with so many different content areas. I'm sure some of our listeners may be thinking, well, I don't teach social studies. I don't teach history. So how can I effectively bring Holocaust education into my classroom? And personally, I think, Emily, you can share so much about this, but Holocaust education can span into every content area, from art to English literature to history to science, even into math. Honestly, you can make a case for any content area. So, Emily, I'd like you to take some time here and share specific aspects about teaching about the Holocaust that may help our listeners implement it into their curriculum. So, what advice would you give to an educator who will be teaching about the Holocaust for the very first time? Imagine it's the beginning of the school year. Their administrator says you are going to be teaching maybe a week or 2 weeks or an entire month or an entire semester based course on the Holocaust. They've never done it before. What advice would you have for them for doing it for the first time?
I think the best advice I ever received, purely just generally about teaching, is no one's going to college in a day. Um, I think that as teachers, you put so much pressure on yourself to get it right, but really, it's an experiment, and you can tweak it and hone it over time. And just talking about the Holocaust at all um, is doing a great service to your students. And I think the most important thing to prep yourself with is to lead your students safely in and out of the material. So there's two aspects. There's the material itself, which there's so many resources that the Holocaust Center of Pittsburgh can share with you and connect you to that make teaching the Holocaust less stressful. I think some, especially novice teachers that I've interviewed, people are concerned about teaching it the correct way because it's such a delicate topic for some. And it really depends on the age of your students. At the Holocaust Center, we typically recommend Holocaust education for grades 6 through 12 and beyond. But we have, in recent years, started working with younger children, mostly on character traits, ideas that create a foundation for talking about the Holocaust and decision making. So there's the material, and then there's the method. And the method is you want to gently lead your students into talking about this somewhat difficult topic and then lead them out of it. And for me, I think it's important when I'm teaching to give students a space to share their voice. That's part of the safely leading them in and out, is talking about emotions that they might be having while learning the topic. And one of our teacher fellows, Nick Haberman, who teaches at Shaler Area High School, he has given a talk about the emotional aspects of creating an emotionally safe classroom, which can be done in person and over cyber learning. And it's just purely giving students the space to reflect. It's reflective learning on what they're taking in and what it means. So as far as advice, I would say don't be too hard on yourself, because there's so many people who are just doing this for the first time, especially in our region. I come from New Jersey, where Holocaust education was basically invented, aside from Israel, and um, you know, most areas of the country don't have expert teachers in Holocaust education, though in Western Pennsylvania, we have this growing network of teachers who are so interested and passionate once they do find out about Holocaust education and what it can do for them. And you're absolutely right, Peter. This topic can be talked about in almost any content area. Um, and the Holocaust Center has resources to connect math teachers and science teachers and art teachers and English language arts and social studies. I can't even tell you how many math teachers I met when I went to the Holocaust Memorial Museum in DC recently, this past month, with one of our local schools. They're just so interested in it because there were people who perished in the Holocaust who would have been, we have no idea what they would have done for humanity. I mean, there were scientists and doctors and inventors and people from all different backgrounds that were trying to contribute to society. Um, and that's sort of where you can make those connections. And when you make these connections, I think it's important to have an organization to be there to recommend items to help you teach the Holocaust, and know that you're not doing it alone in a vacuum. Because there are conflicting ideas about how to teach the Holocaust, but when you have an organization there to help you and advise you, you don't have to worry so much about, am I doing it the right way or the wrong way? Because there's just so many resources available, and a lot of them are free. So, and I, as having taught before, I know free is a great word, because a lot of school districts you're limited in what you can purchase and make available to your
Mhm.
students. So,
So I had a couple specific questions from English teachers at my school and English teachers that I'm just friends with through various networks, and they wanted me to specifically ask you, what literature do you recommend, or what literature do you specifically not recommend for using in any type of Holocaust-based units or courses?
So there are different conversations and debates about this. Um, but at the Holocaust Center, we do encourage English language arts teachers to consider text beyond their curriculum. For example, many schools and curriculum developers rely on two primary texts, actually three primary texts, one of which is phenomenal. Um, but the first two, I would say, The Boy in the Striped Pajamas is something that is quite controversial, which I don't recommend, though I wouldn't chide a teacher for choosing to use that text, because it does develop, you do see a reaction from students that develops empathy. However, it's a very skewed presentation of what the Holocaust really was. And not to mention the fact that there's so much actual diaries from young people that lived during the Holocaust and perished in the Holocaust that we don't need to rely on fiction to do that and to teach the Holocaust. Um, so I'm happy to talk with any teachers who would like to use The Boy in the Striped Pajamas as a springboard for true historical context, because that book is not necessarily based entirely on um, historical context that would have happened. Um, the second text is The Diary of Anne Frank, which most often is read in the form of the play. And while the play is a wonderful play, and we've actually created a training teaching the Holocaust through theater principles, which we offer currently biannually for Act 48 credit. We work with Prime Stage Theater, Wayne Brinda and Mike Perry, to create an experience for teachers to help them teach that play with theater principles and a certain way of coaching students through the text, but also using that text as a springboard to delve even deeper. Um, because this might sound controversial, but The Diary of Anne Frank, as a play, number one, you sort of lose a lot of the sense of Anne's personality and her beautiful writing. And secondly, there's not much Holocaust in the play, um, because it's a story of hiding. And the play ends when we don't we don't know the rest of Anne's story. It leaves that out, her terrible death and what happens to her family. Um, so you can use those texts and then move beyond them. That's one of the things I would say. And there's so many different texts to use. Um, I do recommend. I know that many schools use Elie Wiesel's Night as a text. Um, I personally don't recommend that as a text for children or students in middle school. I think it's a high school text. People tend to choose it because it's short, but there's so many layers to that text. And we actually have a resource available for teachers that explains a lot of the important terms and goes into greater depth about Jewish cultural aspects that inform much of Ellie's experience in the memoir. And just purely understanding what memoir is, I think a lot of students don't understand memoir as a form of artful autobiography, I guess, so to speak. It's not quite nonfiction per se. I wouldn't necessarily put it in that category because it's an artful expression of memory. It's literary. So for any teachers who are interested in teaching night in the high school realm, I'd be happy to connect them with that resource and send it to them. But moving beyond those three texts, my first go-to would be the actual diaries of children who experienced and suffered during the Holocaust. Number one, they're around the same age as your students. And there's many visual accompaniment resources to go with it, like documentaries that actually go through the diaries. Gerda Weissman Klein as a survivor who wrote a memoir about her experience, and she was a young woman during that time. Um, Beautiful writing. I highly encourage teachers to consider that memoir if they're looking for something to do in seventh or eighth grade, um, and or beyond. There's just so many things that we can share with you, and not to mention that there's also text that we've created, and we'll talk about, I guess, later. But Chutzpah is our comic book that it's a comic book original to the Holocaust Center of Pittsburgh that comes with a teacher resource guide, and also we call it a comic book, but it's also can be considered in its in its volumes altogether, kind of like a graphic novel format. Um, so there's many lessons and guidance within the teacher resource guide to help connect what you're learning in the classroom to the stories in Chutzpah, and also in another Holocaust Center original text, Flares of Memory, which is vignettes of memories from Holocaust survivors that settled in the Pittsburgh region. And that also helps to make it more personal to your students, is to read these actual testimony style vignettes from Holocaust survivors in the area, some of which are still living.
Sure. Yeah, I think it's super important to take away from all of this that, there are going to be resources out there that may seem interesting and engaging to the students, but whether or not they're giving a true testament of what happened during the Holocaust and giving students a true understanding of what occurred, that is crucial. So we want to focus on primary sources. We want to focus on content that is developmentally mature enough for these students, right? So, Emily, you were mentioning
Exactly.
Night. Night is an incredibly powerful and amazing text to represent what happened during the Holocaust. And I specifically read it in ninth grade. And me reading Night in ninth grade versus me reading Night as, a 27-year-old teacher, totally different experiences. So, it's important to analyze the text that you're providing to your students based on how mature they are as young adults. So will they take away everything they need to from this, or will a lot of it go over their head based on the content being discussed or the emotion and just impact of what is being discussed? So we want to focus on the facts, and we want to focus on just giving developmentally appropriate content for these students to understand what happened during the Holocaust and getting an emotional response to understand why it was so impactful and a horrific experience. So we're actually going to transition now into that chutzpah, because that is, I think, one of the first ways I really connected with the Holocaust Center. The graphic novels are something that a lot of students can connect with. They're engaging. The images are just very, very interesting and draw the reader in, and the kids absolutely love them. So can you give some detail on what how chutzpah impacted Holocaust education, not just in Pittsburgh but across the country, Emily?
Sure. Chutzpah is really one of our most beautiful projects. So it's officially called Chutzpah, Superheroes of the Holocaust, and the reason why it's called a Chutzpah is because there's a Yiddish word called chutzpah, which means audacity. Um, and it it's acclaimed, and it's ongoing series, and it's created and published by us. And our Chutzpah project coordinator is Marcel Walker, and he has created a wonderful team of artists and writers to make this dream come true. And it's been a longstanding project of the Holocaust Center, predating a lot of the staff that are currently here. So this has been a morphing project that included a lot of effort from so many different people in the history of the Holocaust Center. So I just want to acknowledge that. It's stories that it focuses on stories primarily of upstanders, people who exhibit resilience and resistance and sacrifice. Um, and many of those people who are featured are either liberators or Holocaust survivors from the Pittsburgh region, or who settled in the Pittsburgh region. Um, there are other volumes that focus on individuals who are not local to Pittsburgh, but whose stories maybe are lesser known. In fact, our newest volume, which is in its production process, is Volume 4, Women in the Holocaust. So more to look forward to on that volume. But the first three volumes are what the teacher resource guide really focuses on and draws themes from. but they're all focused. Though it's an interesting format to be reading a true story. It helps a lot of students that have literacy issues to process the story and process the truth within it. Um, and it also presents a different idea of what a hero is. So I think that's one of the best parts about it. And we recommend it for generally for audiences 12 and up. But we do have other students that, who are part of bar and bat mitzvah programs who are younger than 12 who are reading the the comic books and really loving them. And there are Hebrew schools actually that have incorporated chutzpah into their learning before age 12. It's a very vivid and historically accurate product. Um, and the writing is really special as well and helps the kids connect. So it's been a project that I think, if my memory serves me correctly, started sometime around 2012 as far as the development. So it's been building over time and has reached areas throughout the country. In fact, we're now selling it at the Holocaust Memorial Museum in DC. Um, I know it's available in areas of Pittsburgh, different comic books, Wild Card, um, Rickard and Beagle books in Dormont, um, and areas in New York and DC. So um, it is available during this time of COVID-19. We are going to be making Volume 1 digitally available with some annotations as well. So that's something that you can stay tuned more with the Holocaust Center website as to the availability of that. So that can be a teacher's way of dipping into this series to see if it works for them. And then once teachers, if they decide they'd like to use it in their curriculum to gently introduce the Holocaust, um, they can use the teacher resource guide, and that also comes with a digital copy with many different links and resources from other organizations incorporated within it. Um, so that's basically the gist of Chutzpah. We've done a lot with Chutzpah, and Marcel is so gracious to come with me to schools and do talks with community about the power of Chutzpah and how it helps people, again, especially young people, connect to a personal story and learn empathetically.
Sure. And the chutzpah is an amazing representation of cross-curricular education, right? So you could take chutzpah in any of the classes that we discussed, social studies, English, talking about how these phrases or how these paragraphs, these sentences are organized to really put the essential concepts in the text for the students to take away. And then art. What is this scene depicting here? Some of the pages in chutzpah have no text whatsoever, and it's meant to really show off a scene or an experience or some event that the students can take a lot away from. So it's very cross curricular. And it was, like I said, one of the main ways that I really got involved in the Holocaust Center and Holocaust education resources. So thank you so much for that, Emily. I can't wait for the next installment to come out. And I hope more and more of the original copies are turned digital as well. So in this time where a lot of districts and a lot of schools all across the United States and the world are moving digitally for the time being, they can get access to amazing resources like that. So, the next thing we can transition from here is that we talked about advice that you would give to an educator first dipping their toes into Holocaust education. But I want to hear your advice or tips and tricks for a teacher who already teaches maybe a unit or maybe a few lessons or even an entire course on the Holocaust and, does a pretty good job at it. What could you inform them or tell them or teach them on how to take their class, their unit, their lessons, and bring them to the next level? What could they do to bring it up to the next level?
Well, this is a very good question. I think that it means something different for each teacher and where they're at in their skill level, as well as their familiarity with the Holocaust. But I will say, as someone working in this field, there is always something new to learn about the Holocaust. Um, they discover things all the time. They being the academic world, about the Holocaust, not just the numbers changing, but um, just things being revealed all the time. So I would just encourage everyone to continually update their own personal knowledge. And there's so many different experiences for teachers that will help them do that. For the Holocaust Center of Pittsburgh, number one, we're always available, and we have a number of teacher trainings throughout the year. Professional development is essential. Um, Many of our professional development offerings are free to participate in and provide, almost all of them provide Act 48 credits to teachers who need them or want them. We also have a Summer Teacher Institute, which I would say, last year we experimented with having two different tracks, an advanced track and a novice track. This year we're going to combine both because Facing History and ourselves as an organization is going to be hosting our Summer Institute for Teachers, which we do every year in July. This, for those who apply, it will be free to participate, and we will also subsidize all of the free curriculum tools for teachers. So, and Facing History is generously giving those to us as well. So I do encourage teachers to come to professional development opportunities because you're not only teaching yourself new things and new methodology, impactful methodology, you're also connecting yourself to a network of other expert teachers, and you can share ideas with each other. That's one of the goals of the Holocaust Center recently, is to just continue building a network of teachers who are interested in teaching the Holocaust. So as far as our Summer Institute, which is the week of July 13th, that is open to anyone from any skill level. And I like to say, because I was a tennis player, that you always want to play with somebody who's better than you, right? Because they're going to teach you.
Definitely.
They're going to teach you things that you can't read in a book. You're going to learn from watching them. And I think it's the same for education. You're going to learn by doing and by spending time with experts. And you really will meet the foremost experts in the field by participating in our summer program, as well as there's many other summer programs available. Penn State is going to be having a program dedicated to their new curriculum, and we have a very good relationship with them. The Holocaust Museum in DC has summer programs, and they have the Belfer Institute, and there's just so much available. And once you become familiar socially with this group of educators, you will learn so much more, and you'll be able to take that with you into your classroom to make even more robust coursework than you already have. So novice and advanced teacher alike, there's always something to learn.
Always something to learn, and always something to learn from someone else. You said it perfectly. I've met so many, fantastic teachers through the Holocaust Center, and if there's ever something that I haven't really tried out before or want to implement into my class, I'm always sure to ask one of my fellow teachers at PA Distance or reaching out to one of the educators that I've met through your institution, because the more eyes you have on something, the more perspectives you can get. They're going to give you something that you never thought of, or an idea that you didn't quite think of, or think through all the way, and it's just going to create a better final product for your class and for your students. So I think that is fantastic advice, Emily. And this is something that I really want to close our teaching about the Holocaust discussion on. Because the Holocaust, despite being, if you're teaching a course or a unit or a lesson, it is one moment in time, but there is so much to unpack there. What caused it? What were the ramifications of it? What was the aftermath? So, Emily, regardless of whether an educator will be teaching about the Holocaust for one day, 1 month, or one semester, there's a lot to talk about. What would you make sure that you teach the students about, no matter if your unit was going to be 1 day, 1 week, 1 month, or one semester? What should teachers definitely make sure they teach their students about before that time is up?
I think, kind of like Maya Angelou said, you don't necessarily remember what someone said, but you remember how it made you feel. That's sort of the approach I would take personally. So to borrow a line from the Fred Rogers Foundation mission, I think it's important to draw the themes that emphasize the dignity and potential of all human beings. And that's the power of Holocaust education, is that this social emotional element of learning where students can take away, even if it's just one story of a real person who truly suffered or made a difference or resisted, that not only informs their knowledge of history, but their decision-making ability in their own lives. They could reinterpret that. To borrow another phrase from a teacher who unfortunately, sadly, can't remember his name, I love what he said, which was his students are at a juncture in time where they're not only learning about history, they're deciding what kind of people they want to be. They're learning about the nature of good and evil. And this topic is one way which teachers can actually do that. They can have that conversation in the classroom. What is good? What is evil? What is the nature of man? And you can take even just one story and flesh it out. And a lot of times, this is another reason why Chutzpah works so well, because you have the visual accompaniment, and the teacher's resource guide comes with a timeline of events. It explains so much about Jewish culture in a concise manner, and provides lessons. And there are many other resources like it. Not in the sense of being a comic book. We're pretty much the only one out there in that realm. But if you only have one day, focus on one story. Focus, you can take something from the macro and bring it into the micro to help them understand, because students, I think human beings in general have a hard time conceptualizing these numbers, 6 million, 12 million. That's something I talk about when students come to the center and they see our exhibit of the Butterfly Project. The Butterfly Project, to be short, is a San Diego-based project, and the goal of that nonprofit is to help students paint one ceramic butterfly to commemorate the lives of the 1.5 million children who perished in the Holocaust. And 1.5 million, when the kids hear that number, they kind of sometimes have a blank look on their faces, because what does that even look like? I mean, it doesn't look like the number on the wall when they come to the Holocaust Center. So I tell them 1.5 million in perspective is around the same number of people who have died, men and women, serving the United States in the entire history of our country. It sort of brings it home. But is that as effective as telling one story? When they do the Butterfly Project, students come to their desk and there's a butterfly, and there's a card of a person, a real person, a child who experienced the Holocaust and didn't survive. That makes much more of a difference in understanding what the Holocaust really is, what it was, who it affected. And like I said, teaching is an experiment. You try something. If it doesn't work, you try something else. But you really can't go wrong with a story. I love this one line from poet Marie Howe, that human beings live on stories. I'm pretty sure that's why the Bible is so popular. So that would be my advice, is just do some reading. I know there's another educator who I think very highly of. Her name is Susan Stein. She would be more than happy to come to your school to do activities, especially those related to English language arts, though she's not limited to that content area. And she has a lot to offer as far as diaries, and using diaries to help students understand one person's story in the context of history. So you can provide historical context, but really what's essential to me as an educator is that when my student reads the story or hears the story or talks about the story with their peers, and does reflective learning about it, that story becomes a part of them and their critical thinking abilities, and their ability to make decisions in their own lives, and for them to value their own life, to learn the value of life, if that makes sense.
It does. It does. That was an amazing way way to put all that. Really bringing it to life for the students. And in the end, that's what we want to achieve in any type of learning opportunity that we're providing to our students. Bringing that learning to life, because you can tell a student anything, but it doesn't mean that it's going to sink in. And you give the just great representation that even if you have one day, 1 week, 1 month, or one semester, the thing that the student is going to remember the most is not what you tell them, but what they're learning from and how they're learning it. And sometimes that personal experience about an individual who survived or didn't survive the Holocaust or the Butterfly Project can really set the scene for what the Holocaust is and go from that macro to the micro to bring all of that learning to life. So, Emily, fantastic job really opening our listeners up to the power of Holocaust education, how it is so, so important, and how they can get access to you and the Holocaust Center to learn more about it and hopefully implement it into their curriculum. So, Emily, I want to open the floor up to our listeners here because they had a few questions that they shouted out to me. If you want to ask a listener question to any of our upcoming guests, ladies and gentlemen, please make sure that you follow us on Twitter at Humans of Podcast, or you can follow us on Facebook, Humans of Teaching. You can shout any question out for the upcoming interviewees. And Emily, I have two here that I think are going to be really powerful ones. One of them is going to be really effective to help our teachers, implement this into their classroom a little bit more. And then the other one is a big question that I also have myself for you. So the first one, what online resources outside of the Holocaust Center, if a teacher just wanted to go online and had a unit or a week or a day to teach about the Holocaust, where could they find these diaries? Where could they find these primary sources? What websites or databases could they use to find quality factual materials to teach about the Holocaust?
Oh, I love that question. Um, there's so much available. First, I would direct you to a new portion of our website, hcofpgh.org/digital-resources. This is an entire compilation of not only our resources, but resources compiled from the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum, Yad Vashem, um, and all of other centers around the country who are pulling together a lot of digital resources and making them available to our teachers. Facing History and Ourselves is an amazing resource. I highly recommend them. Echoes and Reflections. There's just so many factual and reliable information portals, which is another reason why I say you don't necessarily have to rely purely on what's made available to you by your curriculum that's been given to you. There's so many things you can use to flesh out what you've been given in an accessible way. So I would definitely recommend going to our website to look at our compilation of resources. I also have a document, a PDF of resources I can send to teachers individually. And one of the great things about reaching out to the Holocaust Center is if you have some sort of niche topic that you want to teach, we can direct you. If we don't have the resource, we know people who do have the resource. Another resource that's great for teachers is Classrooms Without Borders, which is one of our sister organizations under the Jewish Federation of Greater Pittsburgh. They have an immense number of resources as far as lesson plans and experiences for teachers. So I highly recommend them as well, and we love working with them. So, as far as individual lesson plans and things like that, I really do, personally, I favor Facing History. Some of my colleagues might like other things, but Facing History for me just feels so accommodating because it breaks down lessons into a month, a week, a few days. I highly recommend taking a look at their site. And the United States Memorial Museum, USHMM, has a plethora of resources. One of the things I love from USHMM is their online encyclopedia and their archival objects. You can look up an object and create an activity around the object. They have a lot of lesson plans, and we can connect you with educators from the museum in DC to help you flesh out your lessons, people who have been teaching the Holocaust in their classrooms for many, many years. And we have some of those teacher fellows local. We have a local Echoes and Reflections fellow. We have a local USHMM fellow. And we're happy to make connections and build bridges between these groups of educators because it can only serve us all. So I just want to open that up to everyone, that feel free to email me anytime and I'd be happy to connect you with what you need.
Yeah, that's Emily's job. She's the guru of Holocaust education. Listen, there's been times that I've emailed her and all the other people at the Holocaust Center at any time of the night, and they always get right back to me. She's an amazing resource, and I hope all of you utilize her as well. So, I personally love Facing History and ourselves as well, Emily. I can attest to that. They have lessons that have all of the PDFs and assignments and materials hyperlinked in there. So you can download them, print them out free completely, and everything's just very clear, and they talk about what the teacher could be doing, what the students could be doing. They provide uh you know learning opportunities afterwards if you'd like to continue it. Listen, they think the whole thing through. So Facing History is amazing. I've used Echoes and Reflections. The United States Holocaust Memorial Museum has a lot of exhibitions and factual artifacts that you can use for maybe scavenger hunts throughout your classroom, or station activities where the students are analyzing artifacts from the Holocaust. Classrooms Without Borders is an amazing organization. Listen, she's not lying, guys. There's so much out there for you to use. So if you're nervous, if you're intimidated, don't be. Ask the people for help that know what they're doing and start researching, and you'll be able to implement the Holocaust into any class that you're teaching. So, the last question that I'm going to ask you is something that I actually have yet to truly become involved in, as far as specific students being involved in this. So, we talk about Holocaust denial in class. We talk about Holocaust deniers. We talk about the Irving versus Lipstadt trial. We talk about the Nuremberg trials and the aftermath of the Holocaust nowadays. But I want to know, how have you specifically responded to Holocaust deniers, whether it was any event that you have hosted or in specific classrooms, to give advice to teachers, including myself, if and when that could happen in our classrooms, and how we could react to a student or a family member of theirs denying the Holocaust?
Ooh, that's a heavy one. That's a
It
heavy
is. It
hitter.
is. We saved it for last.
um, hmm. You know, sadly, I think Holocaust denial is a reality. I personally have not witnessed Holocaust denial in any of our settings, though I haven't been working with the Holocaust Center as long as some other individuals who are on our staff. Um, but it is a reality. I know that the Holocaust Center is working to do more for teachers in this realm to help them react or not react to Holocaust denial. But something that I find really profound is using primary resources, such as testimonies, um, focusing on real testimonies of what happened. Um, and I don't think you can necessarily reason with denial. That's my personal opinion. I can't speak for the Holocaust Center of Pittsburgh on this fact, but I can speak for myself that it is very difficult to face denial when you know the history to be true and you know people who have experienced this in their lifetimes. Um, I think it's important to draw on your local resources. So not just the Holocaust Center of Pittsburgh, but also if you're local to the Pittsburgh area, University of Pittsburgh has an amazing scholar, Kathleen Blee, who has studied individuals who are in and leave white supremacist groups. There's so much available online. I do like to draw from Dr. Irvin Staub's curriculum on bystandership, active and passive bystandership, because that can address some of those issues. But essentially, there's going to be denial, and it's not logical. because we know what has happened. And you can even look at other testimonies from other catastrophic times in history, and people can deny them. But if you have the firsthand testimony, someone who was really there, you can focus on those things and have conversations with. I think it's also good to rely on the structures within your school system. For example, your school psychology department, um, your your administrators, and the Holocaust Center of Pittsburgh. I know that there are other scholars and other colleagues that I work with who may have had more experience with this. I do want to give a shout out to my team on this. It's something that we discuss, um, especially the education unit. And my advice would just be to keep a calm head about it, to realize that a student who is confronting you with denial is often repeating what they've heard at home or elsewhere. Um, and there are resources for combating white supremacy and other forms of hatred and racism through organizations that we are connected to. For example, the Anti-Defamation League is a great resource, the ADL. Our contact is in Cleveland. Um, they have some great resources as far as dealing with denial. Um, and I think it's important to take that denial as something that necessarily you won't be able to overcome necessarily. So it takes kind of all that responsibility off the teacher, though it is the teacher's responsibility to show, no, this is how we know that it happened, and then it's up to that student to use their critical thinking skills to make a decision. It might not be the decision you're hoping for, but you never know when that information you'd share with them is going to sink in. That's what I would say, is that it can often sink in much later, after they realize, where their own denial is coming from. That's all you can do.
Sure. That's all you can do. Yeah, just like you said, Emily, there's a reason they believe the things that they do. And we as teachers can't just call our students out and be like, no, you're wrong, because that just makes them shut down and not be interested in learning the possible other perspective.
Hmm.
So, as a social studies teacher, one of my favorite things for my students to do is have a different perspective. Because if every single student just believes everything that I say, obviously it's factual information that I'm sharing with them, but if everyone has the same exact point of view, there's no thoughtful discussion. They're just getting fed the information and, obviously digesting it, but having a different perspective is, in my opinion, a good thing. So I also teach US government, and having students who say, Mr. Meisel's, voting doesn't matter. Why should I go out and vote? What's one vote going to make a difference? The same exact stance could be on Holocaust denial. Mr. Meisel's, the Holocaust didn't happen the way we think it did. Well, having that student make a different stance might wake up the rest of the students and be like, I wonder why that student thinks that way. So, reacting in a way that says, that's a very interesting viewpoint that you have. Usually, these happen at the start of a discussion, obviously. When they have more information and more background and they've come to all the lessons and learned all the materials, usually they don't believe the same way about voting doesn't matter or some certain thing about the government. But I often tell them, that's a very interesting viewpoint that you have there. And, everyone's entitled to their own opinion, but let's see if you still believe that at the end of this unit or at the end of this course. And that's okay. If they still believe that voting doesn't matter, they at least have the information to change their viewpoint down the road. And I think we can kind of handle Holocaust denial the same way, by acknowledging that viewpoint and giving them the resources that show that, listen, the information is so clear that the Holocaust did in fact happen. But I am letting you as a young adult make that decision for yourself. We shouldn't force these beliefs on these students. They're young adults, and I think they can make these decisions themselves. But to understand that they shouldn't shout these things amongst the class and try to persuade the rest of their classmates things that are clearly false. So it is an interesting teeter-totter of how to handle a situation like that, and I understand why, it's something difficult to discuss. Holocaust denial is a very difficult thing that we still have to battle with now, and just like you said, it's going to be in the classes that we teach. It's going to be in the world around us, but I think embracing different perspectives and just providing the knowledge to give the students everything they need to prove Holocaust denial to be false and prove that the Holocaust actually happened is kind of the best that we can do. What do you think about that?
I agree. I think that, I mean, if you're feeling confident in your material, you could even use a Socratic method
Yeah.
and let's play out the scenario. Um, where did all those people go?
Yeah.
If they existed and we have documentation that they existed, where did they
Right.
go? Just sort of using what, just talking it out because they are children.
Sure.
Their brains are still forming. Our brains are still forming well into our
Yeah.
20s. So rather than shaming them, um, they could associate. They don't. You won't. You don't want them to associate their learning with shame. You want them to have their moment of mistake so that they can look back on it and not be ashamed of it. Because you you can't be ashamed of something you don't know, um, and you shouldn't be. I think it's just a barrier to learning. So I would say, like you're saying, take it as an opportunity to help students use the tools to understand history, to understand their role as in civics, um, and that's all you really can do. And you just never know the impact you're making, and even if you can't see it right away.
Exactly. Exactly. I love it. All right, Emily. Thank you so much for your wonderful insight on Holocaust education, all the amazing things that the Holocaust Center of Pittsburgh does, and your journey to this point. And I can't wait to see all of the amazing things that you continue to do at the Holocaust Center or wherever the road takes you. So I want to bring you to life as more than just a Holocaust educator and just as Emily Bernstein herself. So at the end of every single interview here on Humans of Teaching, we have just a session of rapid fire questions, which are questions that are just kind of more whimsical and fun to learn about you as an individual a little bit more. So I'm going to shout them out at you, and you give me the first response that comes to your head. Okay.
Okay.
All right, let's do it. So, how about a book that you most often would recommend to others?
A book that I would most often recommend to others, a Holocaust book that I would recommend to others is Child of the Ghetto by Edda Serve Macklin. I love that memoir. And then a personal book that um, I have so many favorite books. It's really hard to choose.
Right.
Um, I think the one that has been lately something I'm thinking about is Albert Camus' The Stranger. I like that because I have a lot of existential thoughts as a Holocaust educator, and as a person, I've always been that way.
Sure.
So I think one of the lessons I personally draw for myself out of that novel is that we don't necessarily find meaning in life, but we make the meaning in life. Um, Not necessarily I didn't necessarily gain that from the novel itself. I was a little too young probably to understand that. But
Hmm.
through studying the existentialists afterwards to understand what I was reading, that's the conclusion I came to. Um, and then, of course, Harry Potter. I mean, it's Harry Potter. That's like I'm total Potterhead. So, um,
I
yeah.
do love Harry Potter. Yeah, I think I remember seeing the first Harry Potter movie at the Monroeville Cinemas. The movie theater isn't there anymore, but I remember it was just my brothers and my dad and I, and he was just like, let's go see a movie. And the first Harry Potter was out, and it was such a game changer. I think, what's your favorite Harry Potter? Mine is personally the first one.
I like the first one, but I also like Order of the Phoenix.
Order of the Phoenix is a good one. Is Order of the Phoenix? That's the one with the mean principal, right?
Yeah.
Ugh, she was brutal.
Ugh.
But
But yeah, the first one is very magical. Like when I
it's so
reread it.
nostalgic. That's my big thing.
Yeah. Yes.
Cool. Cool. All right. So how about the favorite? And now that we have plenty of, I guess you could say, free time since we're all cooped up inside, uh, what's the favorite thing you can do in your free time when all of this isn't going on? And what have you been up to lately now that you're stuck inside a lot?
Well, I I have a dog. Her name is Daisy, but she's affectionately known as Daisela in Yiddish. And she keeps me occupied.
Awesome.
She's so cute, I can't stand it sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
And I love to play the ukulele and I sing.
Nice.
So
That's
I
cool.
keep myself occupied that way. And you know, we're all I'm sure there's some baking. I love baking, but right now it's really hard because not only am I baking, but my mother's baking and dropping it off at my house.
Sure.
And I think some of us will come out of this quarantine like little chipmunks.
Hibernating.
Yeah.
Hibernating through the spring. Cool.
Yeah.
What about scary movies or funny movies? Which do you prefer?
Um, I love both, but honestly, I think my favorite scary movie is The Shining. I just
Mm-hmm.
love the story of The Shining.
Sure.
I also like The Changeling. Um, like classic. I could get into a whole conversation about classic horror. Um, but comedy, I'm lately that's more of what I've been watching because
Right.
sometimes you need a laugh when you come home from talking about the Holocaust.
Yeah, I think that's that's important for sure. All right, how about sweet foods or salty foods? Which do you like the best?
I like them both together.
Ah, like there's my wife Pam, she's really into like salted caramel, insert whatever here. Salted caramel
Yeah.
this, salted caramel that. She'll have salted caramel shoes. She doesn't even care. As long as it's got salt and caramel, she'll eat it. It's funny.
Yeah, really like pretzel salad. It's not really salad
Yeah, what a
and
great
in a
name.
traditional
D-
it's not traditionally a salad, but it's just a layer of caramelized pretzels with and then a layer of like Cool Whip and whipped cream and then a layer of strawberries and jello. Um, it's divine.
It sounds good. It's always great to put like healthy words on things that totally aren't healthy, to just make you feel better about yourself. I respect whoever made pretzel salad and gave it that name. Good service to the world. How about what would we hear if we hit shuffle on your music playlist? What kind of styles of music? What kind of bands? What about
It might be embarrassing. Um, I love I actually like a lot of different types of music, so um, you probably won't find any rap
that? Hmm.
or you know like I like classic rock. Um, I love the Beatles.
Cool.
Um, and I love Iron and Wine, some sort of indie stuff.
Yeah, indie
So
folk
any
kind of
number
stuff.
of things. Yeah.
Awesome. Cool. How about something that symbolizes the era that you grew up in? So it could be a TV show, it could be a toy, could be a style of clothing or something like that.
Well, I'm technically born in the 80s, but I'm more a child of the 90s. So
Sure.
I don't know why, but the Skip It comes to mind. Um,
One time I was using a skip it and it wrapped around both of my feet and I just tipped over onto the concrete. Uh,
I think we've all had that.
yeah. That's probably
Yeah,
why
the
they don't
Skip
make
It
them
comes to
anymore.
mind.
Let me think. My speaking of skip it, did you ever have a bop it?
Yes, totally. The 90s were the best. I'm
They
sorry.
were.
No one can tell me that they weren't. And snacks too. 90s kid snacks, Dunkaroos, they're coming back.
Dunkaroos. My Graham had
Yeah.
a wonderful combination of EL fudges. You remember those cookies?
Yes.
Yeah, those were phenomenal. And gumdrops. She had orange gumdrops and EL
Mhm.
fudges. Not the best combination together, but individually, whenever you were in it, they were great. All right, last one. Last one. Personal quote about the Holocaust you find the most meaningful.
I'm going to cite Magda Brown, um, who's a Holocaust survivor. She actually came to Pittsburgh the day after October 27th and spoke to our community. She said, "You need to have faith and fantasy in terms of survival." That was the context. You need to have faith and fantasy. And that has always stuck with me. And then there's a quote that matches that really well from a Holocaust survivor I grew up with going to my synagogue. Her name is Shirley Gottesman. And she says, "Life leads you." And I think those sort of, as life leads you, you need to have faith and fantasy. That's kind of the two things that I combine together. Um, and it gives me a lot of hope. The Holocaust, while it might be the darkest, one of the darkest moments in human history, there's so many stories of hope. And a lot of times that hope comes from human resilience. And I guess the resilience aspects of what Magda was saying um, really spoke to me, and I carry it with me.
Amazing. Those are really powerful quotes, and I'll really keep them in my mind. I hope our listeners do as well. One of the beautiful things about, honestly, all the quotes that you've shared, you've had so many, they can really connect to anyone and any experience that they've had. You mentioned the Beatles. John Lennon was quoted as having people come up to his house and yell to him on his lawn like, this song speaks so much to me, it means this, it means that, were you trying to say this with that song? And he was like, honestly, no, I was just writing what was on my mind. And it's pretty incredible to know that quotes and events and all of these things that we learn can mean different things to different people. And I hope that all of the things that we have shared with you today, ladies and gentlemen, you can help to better your life, to learn about the Holocaust, to help make this future a better one, a more accepting one, and to teach that to your students so they can be the next generation to be very open minded and accepting of those around them. So, Emily, thank you so much for being here. And I want to open the floor to you. So, please take as much time as you need to share with our listeners how they can get in touch with you, how they can get in touch with the Holocaust Center to learn more about the projects you have going on and how to teach Holocaust education in their schools.
Thank you so much, Peter. This interview has just been so rewarding and
Great.
enriching for me. It's a great way to start the day.
Yeah, it is.
Um, um, so I would just say anyone can feel free to contact me or anyone at the center. We have an amazing team. From our fearless leader, Lauren Bairnsfather, to everyone else. You know, I'm in the education unit along with Ryan Woodward, our librarian and subject specialist, and Jackie Reese, our education and marketing specialist. Christina Sahovi is our administrative coordinator, and she coordinates all sorts of wonderful programming. And she's who you would reach out to actually plan your visit to the Holocaust Center or to request a generation speaker or a survivor to come to your school. Um, we also have Tanya Bilski-Bram, who helps us maintain such a wonderful relationship with our community and help us maintain what we do for the community. And also Marcel, I have to give him a big shout out for all he does for Chutzpah and the sunshine he brings to our office whenever he comes in. So I have to really give our team a lot of credit. But you can reach out to me personally. My direct dial is 412-801-7022, or you can email me at ebernstein@hcpgh.org, and I'd be happy to help you. We also have our website, which is hcof, that's OF, pgh.org. And on that website, you'll be able to have, there's a contact form. So if you'd like to contact any of us about a field trip or about the Butterfly Project, that's something I forgot to mention earlier, is that we have generous grant funding from a local family who really wants to see the Butterfly Project blossom. So we've partnered as a liaison with the Butterfly Project and this independent donor family to make it possible. And we can subsidize up to 2 kits per school to participate in the Butterfly Project on a yearly basis. And funds are limited, so I do encourage you to apply soon. Um, and that means you can roughly do 36 to 72 butterflies supported by the Holocaust Center. And we have a lot of other activities coming up really soon. Despite all of our social distancing, we're trying to bring people together virtually. We have an event on April 5th, and it's part of a much larger summit. It's a digital summit called Together We Remember, What Does Never Again Mean to You? So I encourage you to take a look at that on our website. I'm actually going to bring it up right now because I want you to know everything that you can. There's going to be a panel discussion at 5:30. It's going to be so interesting. Lots of different scholars in the field of not only Holocaust education, but discussing hatred in general, racism, and understanding all of these concepts and how we can turn memory into action. And there'll be a digital vigil as well through the Together We Remember organization. And we're working closely with David Estrin of Together We Remember and Nick Haberman of the Light Initiative, which is another organization headed by Nick Haberman to help bring STEM education and Holocaust and human rights education together in the classroom. It's fascinating stuff, so we'd be happy to connect you with him if you're interested, especially if you're interested in having your own light center someday. Then we'd be happy to discuss more of that with you. We're also in conjunction with our April 5th event having an opportunity for teachers on April 2nd, a digital professional development with Act 48 credit available with Nick Haberman. And I want to bring this up for you too. It's sorry for the delay. I know you can edit this. It's called a virtual workshop for teachers, bridging the gap between education and action in the age of COVID-19. And the virtual vigil is the following Sunday, April 5th. The virtual vigil and panel, What Does Never Again Mean to You? And that begins at 5:30. We have a number of so many different events coming up. And so I encourage you to go to our events page on our website. And if you have any questions or would like to register, you can either do so online or we can forward you the registration links directly to your email. I'm trying to think of anything else that's going on. There's just so much. There will be Yom HaShoah, or Holocaust Remembrance Day. It is coming up in April, and we will be having an opportunity for teachers and students to participate in a lunchtime Zoom event. There's more to come on that opportunity, which will be updated on our website. But we will have one of the hardest things that about the current situation is not being able to see our survivors in person. We've been calling them and helping them know that we're thinking of them and doing whatever we can to help them. So we will have something virtual set up for Yom HaShoah on April 21st to help bring people together to learn about the Holocaust and to connect us and our students to the topic. And to commemorate the lives not only of our survivors, but liberators, many of which are local to Pittsburgh. So stay tuned for more on that as well. And again, please feel free to reach out to me with all of our teacher trainings that are coming up. I do independent consulting for educators in their departmental meetings. If there's anything I can be of assistance for you, we're always happy to help. And I know that to be the case for our entire team, especially our education team.
So folks, whenever you're listening to today's episode, please make sure to check out the show notes. I will include every single link to Facing History, Echoes and Reflections, the Holocaust Center's website, the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum, every single thing that Emily has referenced here, I'll make sure to include in the show notes so you guys have easy access to, get a hold of it and help incorporate the Holocaust into your classrooms. Anything else, Emily?
Nope. I'm just so grateful that you asked me to come on your show. I think what you're doing is so wonderful.
Cool. Thank you, Emily. Thank you so much for being here. And folks, remember, reach out to Emily with any questions or concerns you have about Holocaust education. She'll be sure to get back to you. And that's all for today. So folks, please make sure that before you sign off on today's episode, you listen to the outro to see how you can support Humans of Teaching, and we'll be sure to listen to you next time. Emily, thank you again for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. We appreciate each and every one of you who tune into Humans of Teaching for each new interview, story, and perspective. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast if you haven't already, and follow us on Twitter at Humans of Podcast. If there is someone you know who would find value from this episode, or Humans of Teaching in general, please share it with them. This podcast was made to inspire teachers, and the more we can share it with, the better. If you or someone you know is a teacher of any kind and have a unique perspective or story to share, we'd love to hear it. Please email humansofteaching@gmail.com for a chance to appear on our show. Thank you again for listening, and we'll see you next time.